Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have a lot to talk about. The NBA offseason has unofficially begun as of yesterday. I'd like to apologize, first of all, before we get too into the episode for there not being sound yesterday. We're going to cover a lot of the topics from yesterday, including the breaking news that happened in the middle of our show with the trade between the Bulls and the Thunder that took place. A kind of mind-boggling trade. We'll talk about all of the everything that happened with that trade and why it is shocking to me that that is what happened there. We're also going to talk about JJ Redick being hired for the Lakers, where then we're going to talk about two other players that were signed earlier, including Malik Monk, who got re-signed to the Kings last night, and Pascal Siakam, who re-signed with the Pacers just a couple days ago. We are going to then go into the MLB for the rest of the show. We're going to talk about that jumbled up NL race, how it affects the trade deadline that is just over a month away. We're going to talk about who might be buyers, who might be sellers, and everything else surrounding the deadline there. And then we're going to finish off our show with Friday Power Rankings. It has been a week. We have maybe a new number one up top after the Yankees lost a series or two and got hit with some injuries. We'll talk about that and much more. We're going to start off, of course, in basketball, though. But before we get into that, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to start off our show today with a head-scratching move. Alex Caruso gets traded from the Chicago Bulls to the Thunder for Josh Giddy, straight up. Now, nothing against Josh Giddy, although, to be fair, some stuff against Josh Giddy. He is not worth Alex Caruso. I don't know what the Bulls were thinking, honestly, and I was going a little bit easy on them yesterday as an initial reaction, but the more I think about it, the less this makes sense. The Bulls are in a position where they have been mediocre forever, right? Ever since Derrick Rose injury, they've just been okay, right? They haven't been in a position where they're really competing for titles, but they're also not in a position where they're able to be bad enough to get these top draft picks, right? They're just kind of okay, an 8 seed, a 9 seed, getting in those play-ins, making the playoffs, but just barely, and then losing in the first round. You're not getting your team any better, right? And I feel like they finally decided, hopefully, that they needed to blow it up by trading Alex Caruso, and everyone's been talking about it for a while. Hey, trade Caruso, you can get a lot. People have been talking about multiple first-round picks. They said no to a trade earlier in around the trade deadline, if I remember correctly, for a top 10 pick in the NBA draft for Alex Caruso. And now they trade him. He was probably your best asset. He was an expiring deal, one of the best role players in the league. His ability to play perimeter defense and provide elite three-point shooting, 40% from behind the arc last season. That is an asset that every single contender would love to have on their team. The asset of a great 3-and-D guy, and Alex Caruso is absolutely that. He comes in and the Thunder basically get him for free. Josh Giddy is a guy who was literally benched in the playoffs because he was being a liability to this Thunder team. This Thunder team that is young, hungry, and continues to add more and be better. Right? They add Alex Caruso to a roster that already has MVP candidate Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, runner-up Rookie of the Year, who probably would have won it in any other year except he was going up against Victor Wembanyama in Chet Holmgren. They've got Jalen Williams. They've got the other Jalen Williams. Lou Dort is a great aggressive defender. And now you add Alex Caruso, a little bit of a a little bit of a veteran, a little bit adding that extra defensive presence, being able to help guard guys like Luka and Kyrie, because they were able to shut down Luka just as much as you can possibly expect anybody to shut Luka down. But then Kyrie was going off, and that was the downfall of that team right there, right? You know, this is a Thunder team that had the 1 seed in the West, and a lot of people seem to forget that. They also have a million assets, right? And being able to pull off a trade like this for Alex Caruso without getting rid of a single first round pick, they still have all of that ammo to go and get another guy. They can still continue to add to this team. They did this for cheap. They were probably trying to get rid of Josh Giddy anyway because he was not meshing with that team. He can't shoot. He can't play defense. He's got great court vision, and that's a really great thing to have. But when you're on the Thunder, and you're really on any team, if you want to step up into that bigger role, you need to be able to at least score the basketball to go with that passing, or at least play defense to go with that passing. You can't just be one-dimensional when it comes to passing. You can be one-dimensional in certain aspects of the game and still be an elite player, right? This isn't exactly true, but talk about a guy like Klay Thompson, right? Elite scorer, right? He could play good defense too, but elite scoring is what we remember him for, right? He comes in and he's one of the elite players in the league, and Josh Giddey just passing. There's no one that's just passing and is an elite player, right? He needs to be able to add value either on the offensive or the defensive end, and he is just currently not at that level where he's able to do that. I really don't understand this move from the front office standpoint of the Bulls. You could have gotten so much more. I am just kind of appalled that they didn't get even a second round pick for Alex Caruso. If you shopped Alex Caruso around for more than one phone call with Sam Presti, I guarantee you a contender would give you a first round pick. Like I said, there were offers out there for a first round pick for him. He was going to be the big draw for their blowing up of the team. Sure, Zach LaVine is there, but there's a lot of money that you need to trade to give Zach LaVine up. It's a lot of assets, and he's kind of gone downhill. Alex Caruso was the guy that was going to get you the most, and instead he gets you nothing. I wouldn't be surprised if Josh Giddey isn't on the Bulls in 5 years, right? This is a move that you want to make if you think you are a Josh Giddey away. You're not a Josh Giddey away. This is a team that is nowhere close to competing and needs to blow it up. Maybe they think they can flip him. I just don't understand this move at all, quite honestly. And this was the first big move of the NBA offseason. This kind of signaled the beginning of the NBA offseason. I know it's kind of always been going on, but this move to me signaled the beginning of the offseason, and it's just kind of shocking to me that this is what the Bulls decide to do. They could have really gotten a lot more. Really, I think there were talks of multiple first-round picks for Alex Caruso because he's one of the best role players in the entire league, and instead they get back just 1-for-1. I don't know how the Bulls think they win this trade. Unless they know something we don't know about Alex Caruso, or they are really just that high on Josh Giddey, which I don't know what tape they're watching that I'm not seeing. He's got his own problems off the court, and he's kind of turned into a little bit of a liability in the playoffs on the court, right? I won't say he's the reason they lost, but if he could have shot better, they definitely could have probably won against the Mavericks, right? They were pushing them to the brink there. They were the 1 seed with him. He was benched in Game 5. He was just not playing his best basketball there, and it's a fleece. It really is. I don't know how Sam Presti keeps doing it. His trading, how he gets these trades done, I just don't understand. But he continues to get the best out of everyone in every single trade, and he flips Josh Giddey for a really, really good asset in Alex Caruso. And they were already a 1 seed last year, but adding more depth on the bench adding a great 3-and-D guy is only going to propel them forward. They already have that offensive talent. They were struggling a little bit on the defensive end, especially in the postseason against those high-end guys, and Alex Caruso is someone that will absolutely help them with that. In our next segment, we are going to talk a little bit about JJ Redick officially being hired by the Los Angeles Lakers, a former team of Alex Caruso. He won a championship there. He was a vital part of that team. He has championship experience, something else to add to the Thunder. But we will talk about the Lakers, how we got here, if it's a good decision, and what this hiring might look like a couple years from now down the road for the NBA. So stick around for that. We'll be right back with that and more here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. Look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up in the basement. Statement. The top is so vacant. I'm in this shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Keep my weight to be put down. Hitting your place, I'll get my sound. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the losing fits. I'm losing shit. It's different if you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight, lose your grip and lose your gift. Oh. Feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just broke down the crazy trade that took place almost exactly 24 hours ago, actually, between the Bulls and the Thunder, where the Bulls sent Alex Caruso, two-time All-Defensive Player, to the Thunder in exchange for Josh Giddy straight up. I don't know what they're doing. I don't think anybody really knows what they're doing. I think that's a ridiculous trade to make there in that situation, especially with where you are at in your competition cycle. That's not going to help you get any better as far as draft picks go, and that is not going to help you get any better right now either. So, but in this segment, we're going to move off of that, talk a little bit about the Lakers. They hired a new head coach finally. They cut it real close, a little too close for my liking, too close to the draft, too close to the beginning of the offseason, but they finally get a deal done with JJ Redick, 15-year NBA veteran, first-time coach at any level. We'll talk about what that means for them, what he has to do to succeed, and if he has any chance of succeeding or not. So we'll talk about that in just a second. But before we do, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. I'll get to it as soon as I possibly can. Appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to talk a little bit about the Lakers hiring JJ Redick here. JJ Redick, officially the next Lakers head coach, takes over after the Lakers fire Darvin Ham. They're losing in the first round, this time to the Denver Nuggets, 2 years in a row of being eliminated by the Denver Nuggets. Not really anything to be too crazy about because it's the Nuggets with Jokic and they're very good. But the Lakers move on. They hire JJ Redick after a long, drawn-out process to hire a head coach, one that had twists and turns, had multiple guys being front runners, multiple coaches, high-profile coaches in the running, including Dan Hurley, who rejected them. They were giving him an offer that would have made him one of the highest-paid coaches in the league, not really their usual style, but they did send an offer to Dan Hurley there, which he rejected, and now they hire JJ Redick. JJ Redick, who is a 15-year NBA vet, very smart player, had a great career, hosts a podcast with LeBron, and that's really what's being focused on here, and really is, I think, a big reason why he got this job. And I know, it's not just because it's with LeBron. His podcast is a very numbers-oriented X's and O's podcast. He shows he knows the game. Everybody knows he knows the game. He's great in the media, being able to explain the game of basketball, how they draw up plays, how it's supposed to work, what the theory is behind it. So he clearly knows his game. He's got a high basketball IQ, and also LeBron likes him. And right now, the Lakers are playing the LeBron game. With LeBron, he also hasn't, said he's going to opt into his player option yet, which would keep him in LA for another season. I'd be shocked if he didn't. Now, part of me wonders if he's waiting until after the draft to opt in, because he doesn't have to opt in until after the draft. He's waiting to see where Bronny goes, because Bronny is going to be in this draft. The draft is just 5 days from now on Wednesday, and we'll talk a little bit more about the NBA draft next week as it comes up. It's a little too close for my liking to hire a head coach now, and I know we kind of went over that just a little bit here when we were talking about Monty Williams being fired, how close it is to the draft. I think coaches and draft picks are getting to know the draft pick, agreeing with the GM on how they're going to fit into your system is something that's super important. And this feels like a move that is just like, hey, we know who we're gonna have, we know the general idea, and they have a couple days to figure it out. But not being there for pre-draft workouts, not being there to discuss what kind of player that the coach thinks they need, not being there to have any input on the whole pre-draft process that they've had, which is all but over at this point. 5 days until the draft, there's only so much that they can do. Hiring JJ Redick that late, but the bigger issue for JJ Redick is going to be how he's able to handle the locker room, right? He's going from basically being a peer of these players to having to get them to listen. And in good times when they're winning, I'm sure that won't be an issue, honestly. Winning, it's easy to control. But this Lakers team, there's no guarantee that they're winning. They haven't been higher than a 7 seed. They've only been higher than a 7 seed once in the last 12 years, right? This is a Lakers squad that hasn't consistently been winners. They've missed the playoffs a lot recently. This is not a squad that's super built up for success. They're very top heavy. Anthony Davis, LeBron James, the top of that heap as far as star power goes is powering them to the playoffs every year. But as we saw last season, they weren't able to get out of the first round once they run into the Nuggets, and they did go on to a run 2 seasons ago all the way to the Western Conference. Excuse me. All the way to the Western Conference Finals. But, it's not really a situation that is built for long-term success. And the locker room can obviously, just like everybody else, know that JJ Redick was the second option. They wanted Dan Hurley. They offered him that contract. And now JJ Redick comes in. He's tight with LeBron. And they together have to win over that locker room, right? And I'm curious how much say LeBron James is going to have, right? Obviously, he has a lot of sway. They have a personal relationship, and I wonder how that's going to go if there are any disagreements between the two. Is LeBron James going to respect his decision as a coach if he disagrees with him? Now, I'm sure LeBron James is all gung-ho about bringing his friend in to be a head coach. But, there's situations where he as a player is going to disagree with something that JJ Redick, the coach, is drawing up. And he's not going to be able, unless he wants to split that locker room and have them not trust the coach, to fight him that hard, to really say, hey, you're wrong, I'm the one that brought you here. It's an interesting power dynamic here. And, we don't, obviously, he didn't actually bring him there. There's a lot of other factors. LeBron James says he's staying out of the coaching search, and I think a lot of this is because Rob Pelinka and the Lakers want to keep him in LA regardless of what happens with Bronny James, because there's no guarantee that the Lakers are the team that's going to end up drafting Bronny James here. There's a lot of things that could happen, and LeBron James has constantly said he wants to play with his son. He wants to, He might opt out of that contract. And if he does, or if he doesn't, and Bronny James is on that team, is JJ Redick going to be able to make those coaching decisions to be a successful head coach? Like I said, I think he's a smart basketball guy. I think he has great basketball IQ, and I think in theory he knows what's best for the team, right? But in execution, having the guys actually trust him, having the ability to control the locker room when stuff is not going great. When stuff is going great, I have all the faith in the world that JJ Redick will be an elite NBA head coach with his ability to control the locker room, right? But I'm worried about how it's going to go when they go on a little bit of a losing streak, when they get into an argument, when not everything is kumbaya in the locker room and the coach has to step up and make it better, right? Especially if it's with LeBron James and someone else. I don't know what it's going to be like if there's going to be a disagreement with LeBron James. Are the players going to not respect him as much as they would a different coach because they see LeBron James not respecting their coach? LeBron James has a lot of pull here. And I know that's kind of what this conversation is. And I think JJ Redick has the opportunity, has the ability to be a great NBA head coach. But since it is his first time coaching, and since he has that close of relationship, he has a podcast with LeBron James, it's a weird little power dynamic there that he now has he's the superior, right? In the power level, or I guess the decision making level here, he is higher than LeBron James and the rest of that team. But in basketball, more than any sport, the players have a lot of say in this, right? And I am a little worried about his ability to control that locker room, his ability to keep the team together when there are disagreements, especially if LeBron James is against him, because I don't know whose side these players are going to take. A coach who, in all honesty, is going to be the scapegoat if anything goes wrong there. First time head coach, they're kind of setting him up for failure. He's either going to be great or he's going to be gone in a year or two. They give him that 4-year deal, but it's a lower contract, and they're willing to cut coaches loose, clearly. Excuse me. It also just isn't a great situation for the future. It's going to be fine for a year or two as long as you have LeBron, but LeBron's going to retire soon, and that team has no cap space. That team has no depth. It has no assets. They've gone all in. It's going to be interesting to see what JJ Redick is going to do with the Lakers. I think he has the ability to be a great coach, but there's a lot of factors that go into being a great head coach other than just having the knowledge of the game. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, in the next segment, we're going to finish up our NBA conversation. We're going to talk about two players that signed max contract extensions with their team, Malik Monk and Pascal Siakam. Pascal Siakam signed his a little while ago, but we are going to talk about both of them and what they mean to their teams as the Pacers made it to the Eastern Conference Finals and the Kings had a tough-fought season filled with injuries. What Malik Monk, the runner-up, the six-man runner-up of the year, means to that team. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? Sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about the two biggest stories in the NBA from the last couple days. JJ Redick officially hired as the head coach for the Lakers. He has all the tools he needs to succeed, but I'm not sure how much it's going to work if the locker room does not respect him. And the shocking trade that took place yesterday between the Bulls and the Thunder, where they traded Alex Caruso, where the Bulls traded Alex Caruso to the Thunder for Josh Giddy straight up. 1-for-1, no draft picks, nothing else. Excuse me. Just 1-for-1. A really shocking move if I am the Bulls. Not quite sure why they thought that was a good idea, but in this segment here, we're going to finish up our NBA coverage, talk a little bit about two contract extensions that took place over the last couple days. Pascal Siakam signs a 4-year, $189 million max extension, and Malik Monk also signs a max extension, 4 years, $78 million to stay with the Kings. We'll talk about what each of those players mean to each of those franchises, why they needed to stay if both of those franchises wanted to continue their success, and everything else surrounding that contract. So, but before we talk about that, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to add, go ahead and throw that in the comments section. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. Appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to finish up our NBA coverage here with two big signing as Pascal Siakam and Malik Monk both sign extensions with their team. We'll start off with Pascal Siakam. It was a couple days older than Malik Monk's signing. He signs a 4-year, $189.5 million max extension to stay with the Indiana Pacers after the Pacers acquired him in a midseason trade from the Toronto Raptors. And Siakam was a huge part of their run. Obviously, the Pacers make it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals this year, taking down the Knicks, taking down the Bucks on their way to do it, and really putting the Celtics as close to the rope as they had all season long, right? You could make the argument that the Pacers, even without Tyrese Halliburton, should have been up 3-1 in that series. Doesn't matter. They got swept. That's just the way it goes sometimes, but we have now an opportunity for the Pacers to continue to grow on what was a great season. Okay, I apologize. I don't know. Maybe it's the but anyway. They have the opportunity to grow from what was a surprisingly deep playoff run for them. They came in as a 6th seed. They obviously started off the season hot. Tyrese Halliburton looked like that MVP candidate. They add Pascal Siakam, and his numbers with the Pacers were awesome. Right, he comes to the Pacers after basically right at the midway point of the season. It's 39 games in Toronto, 41 in Indiana. He shoots 55%. That's up 3% from when he was in Toronto, and his 3-point shooting really took the huge jump, right? He shot 32% from 3 in Toronto. In Indiana, he shot 39%. That's a 7% jump. And in the playoffs, he was huge. Those games without Halliburton, and when Halliburton was kind of struggling a little bit to put points in, he was able to keep the offense moving. He was just the 3rd player in NBA history to average 35 and 10 points in each of his first 2 playoff games. Elgin Baylor and Wilt Chamberlain were the other two. He scored the most points in the playoffs for a Pacer since Paul George. That's in elite company in Pacer history right there. And it's the 2nd highest deal by a Pacer. 2nd highest money, only behind his teammate Tyrese Halliburton, right? This combination of him and Tyrese Halliburton were great. It worked really well almost immediately. And keeping those two together to continue to hopefully get better and continue to dominate an East that is ripe for a second team, right? You have the Celtics that are returning just about everyone. Now, it's going to be hard for them to return everyone, but, they're going to be able to, they're going to pay Tatum. He's going to get a $315 million extension. Crazy. They're gonna probably bring back Derek White. He's looking for a good amount of money. I'm not sure if they're actually going to be able to bring him back, but the Celtics are primed to be great again, right? The Celtics, they've already extended Drew Holiday. Al Horford's got a little left on his deal. Kristaps Porzingis has a little left on his deal. Jaylen Brown signed his extension last year. There are places where this Celtics team is primed to be great in the East. The Knicks, if they were healthy, they were that other great team in the East, but these Pacers, they were able to beat them. And keeping Siakam and Halliburton together, they're only going to get better as the years go on. That's a devastating 1-2 punch up high and down low. And with Halliburton's passing ability, the ability to find an open guy, and the spacing that Siakam brings with his 3-point shooting ability and ability to drive on the inside, really a threat at all three levels, is something that works really well with the way that the Pacers like to play the game. So keeping him is huge for the Pacers. The other signing, Malik Monk, he signs himself a 4-year, $78 million deal to stay with the Kings. He was a huge part of these Kings. And I know the Kings took a step back this season. A lot of that was because of injury. He was second place to Naz Reid in the NBA's Sixth Man of the Year voting this season. He had over 15 points a year and 5 assists. This is his max deal. He comes here. He is a huge. If the Kings wanted to continue to be a playoff team, like they kind of were on the fringe, especially in a West that we've talked about how deadly that West is. We kind of talked about it in the last segment with JJ Redick and the Lakers. The Lakers have some pieces, but they don't really have enough to put them over the top in a deep West. We saw Luka and Kyrie make it through a gauntlet to get there. The Timberwolves took down the reigning champs. They have a great team. The previous champions, the Denver Nuggets, right? They're sticking together. They're only continuing to get hungrier to try and get that second title. Wemby and the Spurs are coming. The Rockets are on their way up. The Kings are on the way up. The Warriors still have Steph Curry. They are probably on the way down, but they still have Steph Curry, so you can never count them out. Same thing with the Clippers. This is a stacked Western Conference. There is nowhere to hide in the West. And if the Kings wanted any chance of being relevant with this De'Aaron Fox era, they needed to keep a guy like Malik Monk with his great 3-point shooting. They already have. They've built a team on 3-point shooting, obviously, with their draft picks recently. Keegan Murray, a huge part of that as well. His deadly 3-point accuracy. And De'Aaron Fox, and like I said, the Kings took a step back last season. And a lot of that was just because the West got better. They were a top 3 seed, and they only lost 4 more games than they did the year before, and they drop all the way to the play-ins, right? I didn't even talk about the Pelicans when I was talking about the West, but the Pelicans are on their way up, right? We saw Zion finally play a playoff game, and what he looked like there, right? If he can stay healthy, again, health, that's always the X factor in any sport. We never know. But the West is going to be stacked for a very long time. And if the Kings want any chance at all of being competitive in the West, they needed to keep Malik Monk. His value off the bench, he honestly probably should have won Sixth Man of the Year. Nothing against Naz Reid. I love Naz Reid. And what Naz Reid provides to the Timberwolves off the bench is great. But the Kings without Malik Monk are so much worse than the Timberwolves are without Naz Reid. And I think that's something that you have to think about when you're talking about these awards. I mean, there's a reason that he was second, right? He was still great. The Kings have a chance. I am a big fan of this Kings team. They're one of those like dark horse teams that don't really have that championship upside, but could cause a lot of havoc in the West and take out a contender if they get the ball to bounce the right way and they get their shots falling. They're one of those teams. I like this Kings team. I like De'Aaron Fox a lot. And I think if they're able, they don't really have the assets or the money to add that that next like superstar, but if they're able to add another superstar, if someone in the draft that they take hits, they could take that next step. And keeping Malik Monk was step one of that, because if they lose him, they're kind of back to square one, where they're kind of where the Bulls are right now. They've got a good team, but they're not contenders, right? The Kings are a little further along than the Bulls are, especially after that trade. But I do think that that this was a signing that needed to happen if you were the Kings. So both of these signings, I think, were great. Obviously, the max contract is what you're going to give to these guys that you need to keep so they don't hit the free agency market. And I think the max contract is something that's really cool in the NBA. But good job by the Pacers and the Kings keeping their guys, keeping that I won't say homegrown talent, because neither of those guys were drafted, but keeping that talent in-house and building a culture around it. I think that's huge. In our next segment, we are going to move off of the NBA and into the MLB for the rest of our show. We are going to talk a little bit about the trade deadline. It's a little bit early to talk about the trade deadline there, but we are going to cover it a little bit, especially with the outlook, the way it's looking in the NL, specifically with 9 teams right together, all within 4 games of each other in the wild card race. Only 2 of those teams are going to get spots, but 9 are right next to each other, and not all of them are going to be buyers, not all of them are going to be sellers, and some of them might flip-flop based on what happens in the next month of the season. So we'll talk about all of that and more coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you were just tuning in, we have talked a lot of NBA today. We talked about the crazy trade, the ridiculous trade that took place between the Bulls and the Thunder yesterday, with the Bulls sending Alex Caruso 1-for-1 to the Thunder for Josh Giddy, something that I don't quite understand or wrap my head around. If someone has a justification for that, go and throw that in the comments. I'd love to hear any kind of justification for why the Bulls might do that. We also talked about JJ Redick being hired by the Lakers. An interesting decision. We all kind of saw it coming after all these reports, but I'm curious to see how it actually will work out. And then we just finished talking about 2 max extensions that were signed, one by the Pacers, Pascal Siakam, and one by the Kings, Malik Monk. We talked about what they mean to the team and how that will help both of their teams in the future if they want to continue to grow. We're going to move out of the world of the NBA, though, and into the world of baseball, the MLB, to close out our show. We got 2 segments here. As always, we're going to close off our show with our Friday MLB Power Rankings, and then we're going to, but in this segment here, we're going to talk a little bit about that NL wildcard race. It's kind of crazy. I know I touched a little bit on it, I think, last week when we were talking about how crowded it is right there. There are 9 teams that are within 4 wins of each other. If you go and look at the box score, or at least the standings in the NL, there are 9 teams that are within 39 to 35 wins, and there's only 2 of those teams that are going to get playoff spots. The other playoff spot currently is held by the Braves, who are a little bit above that threshold, but it is a wild race. And with the trade deadline just about a month away, this is when these teams that are in that kind of middling position need to decide whether or not they are going to be buyers or sellers at the deadline. And I'm not sure what's going to happen. We'll talk about which teams might be buyers, which teams might be sellers, and which teams should be buyers and which teams should be sellers at the deadline. But before we get into all of that, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments, in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. Excuse me. I appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to get into some MLB talk today, starting off with who is going to buy at the MLB deadline, right? There are so many different combinations of things that could happen here, right? The last time that something like this happened was in 2009, right? There were 7 teams that were in the race there, right? And there were only 2 wild cards at the time, so it's very, very similar. All of these teams, like I said, there are 9 teams that are anywhere from 35 to 39 wins right now, and with it right around the corner, there's only a couple teams that really have separated themselves. The Phillies have separated themselves in the NL. The Brewers have separated themselves in the NL, and I guess you can kind of say the Braves, although they are kind of hurting and almost falling back into that group, so we might even have 10 teams there right now. But for the time being, we're going to take a look at the 9 teams that are right there in the standings, right? So right now, for clarity, the 9 teams that are in that kind of middle standing together are the St. Louis Cardinals, the San Diego Padres, the Arizona Diamondbacks, the New York Mets, the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Washington Nationals, the Chicago Cubs, the San Francisco Giants, and the Cincinnati Reds, right? Those are the teams, those are the 9 teams that are right there with between 35 and 39 wins, all jumbled up together. Now, only 2 of those teams are most likely going to make the playoffs. There are 3 wild card spots, but the Braves have 41 wins. They are 5 games up on everybody else that I just mentioned. So they've got a little bit of wiggle room. But out of those teams, who is going to add? I can tell you off the bat who I don't think is going to add at all. The Washington Nationals. I'm a Nationals fan. They are a year out, probably. It doesn't make sense for them to add right now, especially how they've just kind of said, oh, we don't really care how this season goes. That feels like what their attitude has been right now. But if they go on and rattle off a couple wins, right now them and the Mets are the 2 hottest teams in the NL. I expect them and the Mets both to be sellers at the deadline. But right now, they are tied in that wild card race. Ever since Grimace threw out that first pitch for the Mets, they are 8-1, which is ridiculous. They are now tied with the Nationals. They were like 5 games back just a week or 2 ago. So anything can happen in the game of baseball, but I don't expect either of them to add. The Pirates, they could add. They've just called up Paul Skeens, but I also don't feel like they're in a position to add guys. The teams that I think will definitely add, the St. Louis Cardinals, they've got a little bit more of an aging core. They're kind of on, you go through the slope of contention, right? You have your first window, which is, hey, we've got young, exciting stars, and we're gonna make sure that they have everything they need. Then you get your contending window up here, and you have your falling off point of your guys. Right now, if the middle is the Cardinals, they're a little bit past their contending window, right? Their stars are getting a little older. They need to get that championship now. They need to continue to add. The Cardinals, I absolutely expect to go and get a couple arms for that pitching. Get some bats that are actually hitting nowadays. They've had a slumping Paul Goldschmidt, someone who they counted on a lot to be a big part of their offense. But they need to they need to add more. The Arizona Diamondbacks in there as well. They're kind of on they haven't hit that top of the bell curve yet. They just made the the World Series. They're the reigning NL champions. They've had a little bit of injury issues. They're not going to add too much, I don't think, but they'll probably add maybe an extra arm for depth, some bats for people that are struggling in the lineup or more injuries protection. Same thing with the Padres. They're the same role as the Cardinals, right? Their guys are getting older, kind of getting over the hump. They've already kind of made those big moves. They traded for Soto. That didn't work. They went out and they got Machado a while ago. They got Xander Bogaerts, who's struggling a little bit this season. They've gotten the pitchers. These guys need to make the move now. And the Reds are also in that kind of thing where they're not going to sell. I'm not sure if they're going to add. I don't know if they're going to go all in this season, but if there's a year to go all in, this is probably a good year to do it because I'm not sure who is going to be paying a lot right now for guys. But the Reds are a team that might be doing it. Like I said, I don't think the Pirates, I don't think the Nats, and I don't think the Mets are going to be adding. I think all of those guys are probably going to be sellers. The Pirates might not be sellers. The Nationals have a little bit of a question because they are close to contending. They have some guys coming up soon. A question is Kyle Finnegan. Kyle Finnegan is one of the best closers in baseball right now. He's third in the league in saves, 21 saves on the year, and he's been having a great season. But also, closers like that are tough to find. Do the Nationals hold on to him? Do they trade him for some good value? That is the kind of question that the Nats are going to be asking. The Mets, I don't know how long this grimace run is going to go, right? But, I don't expect them. I expect them to be true sellers at the deadline, right? And then the biggest question here is the Cubs, right? The Cubs and the Giants. They're both teams that kind of have gone all in at this point. The Cubs and the Giants they made a lot of moves this offseason. They signed back their guys. The Cubs are coming off a playoff appearance, right? They made some big free agent moves, but it hasn't really worked out the way they want it to. And they seem like they're the teams that are going to buy, but they don't really have the assets to go out and buy players right now. They're kind of stuck in limbo as far as competition. This is where the Giants have been for a long time. They're kind of stuck in this mediocrity of a wild card, maybe berth, and the Cubs are right there with them, which is not exactly where you want to be. They're not true contenders, but they're also not bad. So that's where you have to make your decision to buy or sell. I think this deadline is going to be wacky. I don't think it's going to be one of those deadlines where we see a huge, massive move made, but I think some of the people that are going to be sellers and some of the teams that are going to be buyers are going to come out of left field. I don't know who is going to be a seller and going to be a buyer because of how close it is in that National League especially, and there's really no good way of telling right now. We're just going to have to wait a little longer. The deadline is about a month away from now, and I mean, really outside of the NL, I mean, even in the AL, it's really jumbled up there, right? There are a lot of teams that are kind of in that 35 to 39 range, right? If you extend it down to 34, in the AL, there's another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's another 5 teams. So half of the league is between 34 and 39 wins right now. So it's going to be really crowded in the middle, and some of those teams are going to make tough decisions. Some of those teams are going to have to blow it up. We'll see what happens. But anyway, if I had to put some money on it, in the NL at least, the teams that are going to buy, it's going to be the Cardinals, the Padres, the Reds, and the Cubs. Teams that are going to sell, the Mets and the Nationals. And then, other than that, those other teams, I could not tell you anything that's going to go on with them. But anyway, let me know what you think is going to happen at the deadline. We got a lot of time to figure that out. But we're going to finish up our show every Friday, like we always do, with our MLB Power Rankings. We got maybe a brand new name at the top. There's been a lot of moving and shaking around the MLB this last week. Lots of crazy streaks. The Mets, like I said, are 8-1 since we last did our Power Rankings. So we'll talk about that and much more coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back, everybody, to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about the jumbled up cluster that currently is the middle of the pack in the MLB right now, with 14 teams currently being between 34 and 39 wins right now, 9 of them being in the NL, and how that might affect the trade deadline coming up in just about a month. We also talked a lot about the NBA earlier in the show, kicking off our show with the first big trade of the NBA offseason, with Alex Caruso being traded from the Bulls to the Thunder in exchange 1-for-1 for Josh Giddy, something that I don't quite understand. Maybe there's something that I'm missing there, but that feels like a crazy move to make for the Bulls. We talked about JJ Redick officially being the new head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers, a move that I think could work, but also might backfire spectacularly. And we also talked about two new max extensions that got signed in the NBA. Pascal Siakam signed a $189 million max extension with the Pacers, and Malik Monk signed a $78 million max extension to stay with the Kings. In this segment here, we're going to finish off our show, as we always do on a Friday, with our MLB Power Rankings. There might be some new people here at number 1, but before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. Appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our MLB Power Rankings here. And as you can see from our power rankings, we have a bunch of changes at the top. We're going to start at the bottom, though. Start with the White Sox here. White Sox, the bottom 5 still have stayed basically the same. And the way that I'm kind of looking at these power rankings right now, as I was saying in the last segment, there's lots of teams in the middle that can kind of get moved around. But the bottom 5 and the top 10-ish are probably pretty much set. Now you can make a little bit of an argument around 7 to 10 there, but the bottom 5 I think are definitely set. The White Sox, the Marlins, the Rockies, the Athletics, and the Angels. Whatever order you want to put them in, Athletics and Angels, maybe you can switch, but those 5 are pretty clearly the worst 5 teams in the MLB right now. There are a lot. There's a lot of things going on with those franchises, and none of them are really good. The White Sox might be one of the worst teams of all time. The Marlins have nothing going for them. The Rockies, the Athletics, and the Angels all have their own management issues going on. So it's kind of a mess down there. At 25 and 24, we have the Rays and the Blue Jays, both teams that, in theory should be good. They have the rosters to be good, but they've just kind of fallen flat. Rather, the Blue Jays have some underperforming players. The Rays as well also got hit with pitching injuries, and that really hurts them. The Tigers are cooling off. I have them here at 23 after a hot start to the season. They're falling back towards the bottom of the pack there. The Pirates and the Nationals and the Cubs kind of grouped together there at 22, 21, and 20. Like I said, the Nationals are one of the hottest teams in baseball right now. They move up a couple spots. The Pirates continue to stay pretty consistently where they are. And the Mets at 19. They are 8-1 since Grimace threw out his first pitch. They are the hottest team in baseball right now. And if they can keep this wave going, maybe they won't end up trading all of their guys. They are right on the cusp of a playoff spot, half of a game out right now, tied with the Pirates and the Nationals. We will see what happens. They just beat the Cubs in a series, which is why, they just destroyed the Cubs in the first game of the series, winning like 11-2, or it was 11-1 before the show went live. They dominated the Cubs earlier today, so they go up a spot on them at 19. At 18 and 17, I have the Reds and the Giants. Both teams, again, in that mix. You can throw the Diamondbacks in there as well. In that mix for that NL wildcard spot, the Reds and the Giants kind of lagging behind just a little bit. They had slower starts to the season. The Reds have a lot of young talent that's starting to show, and the Giants, kind of the opposite, have some of that veteran leadership that's pushing through this hard time for them. They are getting better and healthier, and they are starting to make a push. I expect both of them to add at the deadline. At 16, we have the Diamondbacks, and their offense has started to go. Corbin Carroll has hit near 400 in his last couple games. The pitching is still hurt. It's not where you want it to be, but as long as the hitting is still there, they will continue to climb on this list. The Rangers at 15 continue to fall, though. They're kind of the opposite. They're also hurt, but their bats haven't been carrying them the way that we expected the reigning champions to do. The Cardinals and Astros are there at 14 and 13. The Cardinals are currently sitting at the top of that heap of the NL in that wild card spot, and the Astros are kind of clawing to being in contention this season. They need to pick up the pace soon, but both of those teams have a lot of upside, and I expect both of them to add. The Astros just tossed Jose Abreu. It was about time. He was one of the worst hitters in all of baseball, just above Martin Maldonado of the White Sox. At 12, we have the Red Sox, who finally seemingly broke out of that mediocre stretch that they were in. They ran wild against the Yankees. They set a new franchise record. The Red Sox have been around forever. They set a new franchise record for steals in a game. I believe they got to 10. But they are one of the fastest teams in baseball, and they're good at staying safe on the base paths. That's something that some of these other fast teams cannot say. So I have them there at 12 as they continue to be on a little bit of a win streak of their own. The Padres I have at 11. They dropped just out of the top 10 because they lost a bunch to the Mets. The Mets are on their warpath right now. So they dropped just one spot. The Royals have been struggling. I contemplated putting them one spot lower below the Padres, but I'm really high on this Royals team. Bobby Witt Jr. is an MVP candidate. Him and Gunnar Henderson are playing for that award right now, and I'm really curious to see who's going to pull that out. He is keeping them in the top 10. The Twins at 9, they get Royce Lewis back, and he has been everything you expect Royce Lewis to be and more there at number 9. The pitching's been a little bit of a disappointment, but the bats are going, and as long as they continue to go, this Twins team is going to go as far as those bats take them. The Braves stay put at 8. They've kind of been treading water since the injuries hit them, especially since the Acuna injury. They need to start to pick up the pace. They're starting to get caught up by the rest of the teams in the NL, and if they want to stay above that dog pile, they need to start to speed up. At number 7, we have the Brewers. Again, they're also keeping steady. I have them drop one spot because what the Mariners have been doing on the pitching side is awesome. It's a little concerning that Julio Rodriguez hasn't picked it up yet, but I do believe he will be able to get it going. And once that goes, this Mariners team, the sky is the limit. They continue to expand their lead in that division over the Astros and the Rangers. Number 5, we have the Guardians, and I think there's a clear top 5 in the league. The Guardians, Steven Kwan is hitting 400, basically. Steven Kwan doesn't hit for a lot of power, but his ability to get the ball in play and get it to the open spot is incredible. It's hard to hit 400, that's why we never see it, and he is someone that is flirting with that number right now. His bat-to-ball skills are insane, and him getting on base for Jose Ramirez behind him is really setting the table for that offense to explode. At number 4, we have the Dodgers, and truthfully, they would have climbed if they hadn't been hit with the injury bug. Yoshi Yamamoto and Mookie Betts are both out for a significant amount of time. They are a very, very good team, but having them at 4, they've been there for the last couple weeks, and they definitely would have climbed this week, I think above the Phillies at least, if they hadn't been hit with those injuries. The Phillies, the pitching kind of struggled a little bit. The bats still haven't gotten all the way there. They fall down to number 3. The Yankees fall down to number 2. We have a brand new number 1. The Yankees fall to number 2 here in our rankings. They've been sitting atop the power rankings for the last couple weeks. Again, injuries hit them. They do get Garrett Cole back, but the real reason we drop them down is because they just lost a series to the Orioles in pretty convincing fashion. Now, the first 2 games were close. One went into extras, but they lose 17-5 in the next game, and the Orioles and Gunnar Henderson move up into the number 1 spot in the power rankings. This is their first time being on top of the power rankings. We've had the Dodgers, we've had the Phillies, we've had the Yankees, and now we have the Orioles for the first time number 1 in my MLB power rankings. They absolutely deserve it for what they've been able to do this season. It's going to be it's going to be fun to watch these two teams battle. Right now, the Orioles are half a game back of the Yankees in that division, but they did just beat them in a series, so I cannot put them below the Yankees right now. I'm very excited to see what happens at the deadline. I think the Orioles might add a closer, and that's something that they desperately need. They can't keep trotting out Craig Kimbrell if they want to be World Series, if they want to win a World Series right now, especially with the way that the AL is set right now. But let me know if you have any major gripes with my MLB power rankings here. But anyway, we'll be back next Monday with all the biggest news around sports. We do have a Stanley Cup final game tonight. I think the Oilers, I really want them to go 7, try and get that reverse sweep going. But I think the Panthers might end it here tonight. But come back on Monday. We will talk a little bit about everything that happened in the NHL and everything else that's going on in the world of sports. Hope you have a great weekend. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I feel like it's gonna be a bad day. They're tired of shit.